morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're watching or listening. My name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information that plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we'll provide another installment into our series on the Lincoln-Douglas debates, going on to number 4. So if you haven't gone back and watched 1 through 3, I would highly encourage you to do so that way you understand the actual principles and beliefs of one of the most notorious figures in American history, that of course being Mr. Abraham Lincoln. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the transcripts. Like I said, we're going on to number 4. This debate took place in Charleston on September 18th, 1858. Since Mr. Douglas got to start last debate, Mr. Lincoln will be starting this one, and he says this: Ladies and gentlemen, it will be very difficult for an audience so large as this to hear distinctly what a speaker says, and consequently it is important that as profound silence be preserved as possible. While I was at the hotel today, an elderly gentleman called upon me to know whether I was really in favor of producing perfect equality between the Negroes and white people. While I had not proposed to myself on this occasion to say much on that subject, yet as the question was asked me, I thought I would occupy perhaps 5 minutes in saying something in regard to it. I will say then that I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. That I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say, in addition to this, that there is a physical difference between the white and black races which I believe will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. And inasmuch as they cannot so live, while they do remain together, there must be the position of superior and inferior. And I, as much as any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. I say upon this occasion, I do not perceive that because the white man is to have the superior position, the Negro should be denied everything. I do not understand that because I do not want a Negro woman for a slave, I must necessarily want her for a wife. My understanding is that I can just let her alone. I am now in my 50th year, and I certainly never had a black woman for either a slave or a wife, so it seems to me quite possible for us to get along without making either slaves or wives of Negroes. But as Judge Douglas and his friends seem to be in great apprehension that they might, if there were no law to keep them from it, I give the most solemn pledge that I will, to the very last, stand by the law of this state, which forbids the marrying of white people with Negroes. I will add one further word, which is this: that I do not understand that there is any place where an alteration of the social and political relations of the Negro and the white man can be made, except in the state legislature, not in the Congress of the United States. And as I do not really apprehend the approach of any such thing myself, and as Judge Douglas seems to be in constant horror that some such danger is rapidly approaching, I propose as the best means to prevent it that the judge be kept at home and placed in the state legislature to fight the measure. I do not propose dwelling longer at this time on this subject. So here is Mr. Douglas's reply. He says, Ladies and gentlemen, I had supposed that we assembled here today for the purpose of a joint discussion between Mr. Lincoln and myself upon the political questions that now agitate the whole country. The rule of such discussions is that the opening speaker shall touch upon all the points he intends to discuss in order that his opponent, in reply, shall have the opportunity of answering them. Let me ask you, what questions of public policy relating to the welfare of this state or the Union has Mr. Lincoln discussed before you? Mr. Lincoln simply contented himself at the outset by saying that he was not in favor of social and political equality between the white man and the Negro, and did not desire the law so changed as to make the latter voters or eligible to office. I am glad that I have at last succeeded in getting an answer out of him upon this question of Negro citizenship and eligibility to office, for I have been trying to bring him to the point on it ever since this canvass commenced. Fellow citizens, I came here for the purpose of discussing the leading political topics which now agitate the country. I have no charges to make against Mr. Lincoln, none against Mr. Trumbull, and none against any man who is a candidate, except in repelling their assaults upon me. If Mr. Lincoln is a man of bad character, I leave you to find it out. If his votes in the past are not satisfactory, I leave others to ascertain the fact. If his course on the Mexican War was not in accordance with your notions of patriotism and fidelity to our own country as against a public enemy, I leave you to ascertain the fact. I have no assaults to make upon him, except to trace his course on the questions that now divide the country and engross so much of the people's attention. I canvassed the state that year from the time I returned home until the election came off, and spoke in every county that I could reach during that period. In the northern part of the state, I found Lincoln's ally in the person of Fred Douglass's, the Negro, preaching abolition doctrines, while Lincoln was discussing the same principles down here, and Trumbull, a little farther down, was advocating the election of members to the legislature who would act in concert with Lincoln's and Fred Douglass's friends. I witnessed an effort made at Chicago by Lincoln's then associates and now supporters to put Fred Douglass, the Negro, on the stand at a Democratic meeting to reply to the illustrious General Cass when he was addressing the people there. They had the same Negro hunting me down, and they now have a Negro traversing the northern counties of the state and speaking in behalf of Lincoln. Lincoln knows that when we were at Freeport in joint discussion, there was a distinguished colored friend of his there then, who was on the stump for him, and who made a speech there the night before we spoke, and another the night after, a short distance from Freeport, in favor of Lincoln. And in order to show how much interest the colored brethren felt in the success of their brother Abe, I have with me here, and would read it if it would not occupy too much of my time, a speech made by Fred Douglass in, I'll do my best to pronounce that, in Poughkeepsie, New York, a short time since, to a large convention in which he conjures all the friends of Negro equality and Negro citizenship to rally as one man around Abraham Lincoln, the perfect embodiment of their principles, and by all means to defeat Stephen A. Douglas. And now I will explain to you what has been a mystery all over the state and Union, the reason why Lincoln was nominated for the United States Senate by the Black Republican Convention. You know, it has never been usual for any party or any convention to nominate a candidate for United States Senator. Probably this was the first time that such a thing was ever done. The Black Republican Convention had not been called for that purpose, but to nominate a state ticket, and every man was surprised and many disgusted when Lincoln was nominated. He received the nomination unanimously by a resolution declaring that Abraham Lincoln was, quote, the first, last, and only choice of the Republican Party. How did this occur? Why, because they could not get Lincoln's friends to make another bargain with rogues unless the whole party would come up as one man and pledge their honor that they would stand by Lincoln first, last, and all the time, and that he should not be cheated by Lovejoy this time, as he was by Trumbull before. Thus, by passing this resolution, the abolitionists are all for him. Lovejoy and Farnsworth are canvassing for him. Giddings is ready to come here in his behalf, and the Negro speakers are already on the stump for him, and he is sure not to be cheated this time. He would not go into the arrangement until he got their bond for it, and Trumbull is compelled now to take the stump, get up false charges against me, and travel all over the state to try and elect Lincoln in order to keep Lincoln's friends quiet about the bargain in which Trumbull cheated them 4 years ago. You see now why it is that Lincoln and Trumbull are so mighty fond of each other. They have entered into a conspiracy to break me down by these assaults on my public character in order to draw my attention from a fair exposure of the mode in which they attempted to abolitionize the old Whig and the old Democratic parties and lead them captive into the abolition camp. Someone heckles and says, "The party does not call itself Black Republican in the North." Mr. Douglas responds, "Sir, if you will get a copy of the paper published at Waukegan, 50 miles from Chicago, which advocates the election of Mr. Lincoln and has his name flying at its masthead, you will find that it declares that, quote, this paper is devoted to the cause of Black Republicanism. I am told that I have 8 minutes more. I would like to talk to you an hour and a half longer, but I will make the best use I can of the remaining 8 minutes. Mr. Lincoln said in his first remarks that he was not in favor of the social and political equality of the Negro with the white man. Everywhere up north, he had declared that he was not in favor of the social and political equality of the Negro, but he would not say whether or not he was opposed to Negroes voting and Negro citizenship. I want to know whether he is for or against Negro citizenship. He declared his utter opposition to the Dred Scott decision and advanced as a reason that the court had decided that it was not possible for a Negro to be a citizen under the Constitution of the United States. If he is opposed to the Dred Scott decision for that reason, he must be in favor of conferring the right and privilege of citizenship upon the Negro. I have been trying to get an answer from him on that point, but have never yet obtained one." So as the final reply for this debate, Mr. Lincoln replies. He says, "Fellow citizens, it follows as a matter of course that a half-hour answer to a speech of an hour and a half can be but a very hurried one. I shall only be able to touch upon a few of the points suggested by Judge Douglas and give them a brief attention, while I shall have to totally omit others for the want of time. Judge Douglas has said to you that he has not been able to get from the to get from me an answer to the question whether I am in favor of Negro citizenship. So far as I know, the judge never asked me the question before. He shall have no occasion to ever ask it again, for I tell him very frankly that I am not in favor of Negro citizenship. This furnishes me an occasion for saying a few words upon the subject. I mentioned in a certain speech of mine, which has been printed, that the Supreme Court had decided that a Negro could not possibly made a citizen. And without saying what was my ground of complaint in regard to that, or whether I had any ground of complaint, Judge Douglas has from that thing manufactured nearly everything that he ever says about my disposition to produce an equality between the Negroes and the white people. If anyone will read my speech, he will find I mentioned that as one of the points decided in the course of the Supreme Court opinions, but I did not state what objection I had to it. But Judge Douglas tells the people what my objection was when I did not tell them myself. Now, my opinion is that the different states have the power to make a Negro a citizen under the Constitution of the United States if they choose. The Dred Scott decision decides that they have not that power. If the state of Illinois had that power, I should be opposed to the exercise of it. That is all I have to say about it. Judge Douglas has told me that he heard my speeches north and my speeches south, that he had heard me at Ottawa and at Freeport in the north, and recently at Jonesboro in the south. And there was a very different cast of sentiment in the speeches made at the different points. I will not charge upon Judge Douglas that he willfully misrepresents me, but I call upon every fair-minded man to take these speeches and read them, and I dare him to point out any difference between my speeches north and south. While I am here, perhaps I ought to say a word, if I have the time, in regard to the latter portion of the judge's speech, which was a sort of declamation in reference to my having said I entertained the belief that this government would not endure half slave and half free. I have said so, and I did not say it without what seemed to me to be good reasons. It perhaps would require more time than I have now to set forth these reasons in detail, but let me ask you a few questions. Have we ever had any peace on this slavery question? When are we to have peace upon it if it is kept in the position it now occupies? How are we ever to have peace upon it? That is an important question. To be sure, if we will all stop and allow Judge Douglas and his friends to march on in their present career until they plant the institution all over the nation, here and wherever else our flag waves, and we acquiesce in it, there will be peace. But let me ask Judge Douglas how he's going to get the people to do that. They have been wrangling over this question for at least 40 years. This was the cause of the agitation resulting in the Missouri Compromise. This produced the troubles at the annexation of Texas and the acquisition of the territory acquired in the Mexican War. Again, this was the trouble which was quieted by the Compromise of 1850 when it was settled forever, as both the great political parties declared in their national conventions. That forever turned out to be just 4 years when Judge Douglas himself reopened it. When is it likely to come to an end? He introduced the Nebraska Bill in 1854 to put another end to the slavery agitation. He promised that it would finish it all up immediately, and he has never made a speech since until he got into a quarrel with the president about the Lecompton Constitution, in which he has not declared that we are just at the end of the slavery agitation. Let me try reading that again. In which he has not declared that we are just at the end of the slavery agitation. But in one speech, I think last winter, he did say that he didn't quite see when the end of the slavery agitation would come. Now he tells us again that it is all over, and the people of Kansas have voted down the Lecompton Constitution. How is it over? That was only one of the attempts at putting an end to the slavery agitation, one of those final settlements. Is Kansas in the Union? Has she formed a constitution that she is likely to come in under? Is not the slavery agitation still an open question in that territory? Has the voting down of that constitution put an end to all the trouble? Is that more likely to settle it than every one of these previous attempts to settle the slavery agitation? Now, at this day in the history of the world, we can no more foretell where the end of this slavery agitation will be than we can see the end of the world itself. The Nebraska-Kansas bill was introduced 4 years and a half ago, and if the agitation is ever to come to an end, we may say we are 4 years and a half nearer the end. So, too, we can say we are 4 years and a half nearer to the end of the world, and we can just as clearly see the end of the world as we can see the end of this agitation. The Kansas settlement did not conclude it. If Kansas should sink today and leave a great vacant space in the earth's surface, this vexed question would still be among us. I say then, there is no way of putting an end to the slavery agitation amongst us, but to put it back upon the basis where our fathers placed it. No way but to keep it out of our new territories, to restrict it forever to the old states where it now exists. Then the public mind will rest in the belief that it is in the course of our ultimate extinction. That is one way of putting an end to the slavery agitation. The other way is for us to surrender and let Judge Douglas and his friends have their way and plant slavery over all the states, cease speaking of it as in any way a wrong, regard slavery as one of the common matters of property, and speak of Negroes as we do of our horses and cattle. But while it drives on in its state of progress as it is now driving, and as it has driven for the last 5 years, I have ventured the opinion, and I say today, that we will have no end to the slavery agitation until it takes one turn or the other. My colleague says he is willing to stand on his public record. By that, he shall be tried. And if he had been able to discriminate between the exposure of a public act by the record and a personal attack upon the individual, he would have discovered that there was nothing personal in my Chicago remarks, unless the condemnation of himself by his own public record is personal. And then he must judge who is most to blame for the torture his public record inflicts upon him, he for making or I for reading it after it was made. As an individual, I care very little about Judge Douglas one way or the other. It is his public acts with which I have to do, and if they condemn, disgrace, or consign him to oblivion, he has only himself, not me, to blame. Oh, that's just a quote from, I guess, one of the excerpts that they were pulling during that debate. So if you have any questions about what was said in the fourth debate, questions about what was said in the preceding debates, or there's a topic you'd like me to cover in a future lecture, go ahead and post those down in the comments, because the entire purpose of the Calhoun School of Law is to equip you with the necessary skills and information to combat any sort of lawfare that will be waged against you, your loved ones, or your hard-earned property. So if you have any questions at all, go ahead and post them down in the comments. Excellent. So my name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information that plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and if not, while you're down in the comments, go ahead and let me know how I can do better so I can best serve that purpose of helping you. I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and until I see y'all in the next lecture for the next topic, I bid you all farewell.